All right, in this video we're talking about the robustness of T procedures, and it goes with page 6 in your note packet. Robustness is kind of a funny word, so laugh now and get it out of the way, and then we'll talk about what it means to be robust. The T confidence interval is exactly correct when the distribution of the population is exactly normal. However, no data is exactly normal. So the usefulness of the T procedure in practice, therefore, depends on how strongly it is affected by the lack of normality. Procedures that are not strongly affected are called robust. So when you think of robust, I want you to think of resistant. They mean the same thing. The only difference is that resistant deals with individual measures like mean, median, standard deviation, and robust deals with distributions. However, the idea of them is the same. Resistant measures are not affected by outliers or skewness, and robust distributions are not affected by outliers or skewness. So same idea, resistant deals with measures, robust deals with distributions. So an inference procedure is called robust if the probability calculations involved in that procedure remain fairly accurate. And so what that means for confidence intervals then is that when we say an interval is 95% confident, that the confidence level is still accurate. Like our data will still reflect a 95% confidence interval or confidence level. And remember, that means that if repeated many times, whatever percent of confidence intervals will contain the true population mean. Okay, so that's what the confidence level means, and for a robust procedure, it means that the confidence level meaning is still correct. So if outliers are present in the sample data, then the population may not be normal. T procedures are not robust against outliers. Okay, and again, if you think about it, we're talking about the mean and standard deviation, and the mean and standard deviation are not resistant to outliers, so therefore the T procedure is not robust against outliers. Fortunately, T procedures are quite robust against non-normality of the population when there are no outliers. So that just means skewness, okay? Or double peaked, bimodal. Okay, especially when the distribution is roughly symmetric. Guidelines for using the T procedure. So, except in the cases of really small samples, the assumption that the data are an SRS from a population of interest is more important than the assumption that the population distribution is normal. Okay, so that means your first assumption, an SRS, is weighted more heavily, is more important than the second, which is normal. But here is your guidelines for using the T procedure. Okay, if you have a sample size of less than 15, so a really small sample size, you want to use the T procedure only if the data is roughly normal. Okay, if the data is non-normal or has outliers, the T procedure would not apply. So if you have a sample size of at least 15, so we're getting a little bigger sample size here, the T procedure can be used except in the presence of outliers or strong skewness. Okay, and the last one is talking about large samples. And this is getting at the idea that your sample size is greater than or equal to 30. Okay, so we're getting back into the idea of the CLT here when we're talking about large samples. And the T procedure can be used even for clearly skewed distributions. So this is the same as when we're talking about the Z distribution. Okay, their cutoff for large samples is a sample size greater than or equal to 30. And in this case, then we have the CLT that applies. Okay. So if we look down at example 1, there's just 3 cases of whether or not the T procedure would apply. So let's look at the first one. It says a histogram of the percent of the state's residents who are at least 65 years of age. And this is kind of a trick question because this question represents the entire population. So you know the population mean. So there is no need to estimate it with the sample mean. Okay, you don't need to take a sample because you actually have the population mean. So that's a trick question. But I wanted you to realize that that might come up at some point. The second one, it says that this histogram shows the time of the first lightning strike each day in a mountain region of Colorado, and we have a sample size of 70. So you can see our distribution is roughly symmetric, and we have our qualification for our sample size that is large, and so the T procedure would apply here. Okay, we could use the T procedure because it matches our qualifications. All right, the last one. It says shows the distribution of word lengths in Shakespeare's play. And we have a distribution that is skewed right. However, there's no outliers. So as long as we have a sample size that is large enough, so I would say in this case, if we have more than 30 in our sample size, the T procedure could be used. Okay, if we have a sample size that is less than 30, then we would kind of have to go back and look at the other factors because it has a pretty strong skew. But if our sample size is greater than 30, then the T procedure is good. Knowing when the T procedure applies won't necessarily affect your calculations, but again, this is the type of material that will show up in a multiple choice question, and so you do need to know when the T procedure is accurate and useful.